Okay, and so as I said in an earlier video, one of the first ones of this series, I'm deliberately avoiding parts of the interface because I'm not a real big fan of learning interfaces in a very bland way all at first. Although I I always do that because for me it's the only way to find things out. It's hard to find videos that that take you through a sort of path of logical actions that you want to do, and I'm trying to feel my way through this in such a way as if I was just learning the program, and I'm trying to teach it in a sequence that although you probably want to dive right into it and find out about cloth dynamics, or you want to dive right in and find out about editing and doing all these other things, you're going to have to kind of work through everything that I've shown you up to now just to get to any of those places. And at that point, these other panels will come into play. The tools panel on the left, the options, the properties panel on the right here. You know, each one of these represents an entire discipline in some cases of things that you could learn how to do. But real quick on the interface is that you see up here there's a default interface. A lot of times you mess things up, you want to come back to default. You could always choose that. It's on the list here, default. But on this list also are specific interface layouts for things like if you choose animation, you could, you know, have something kind of tailored towards animating. And then if you mess things up, you could always just come back up here and go to default. You're back to the way it is by default. So that's just, you know, getting ourselves basically oriented into the interface. I don't want to go into too much more detail than that right at this point. Each part of the interface will become apparent when we're doing, you know, training on those things. So feel free to, of course, explore. But like I said before, we're not going to really get into these things just as sort of you know, theoretical where everything is kind of stuff. I don't like to do that. It just doesn't seem productive to me. So so now the next thing I'm going to get into here, and we'll have to break this up into a few videos probably, and that is now that we know about transform orientations, we know a little bit about selecting with the right mouse button and moving things around. We know pretty much how to get around the interface. We know where to find how to set the pivot point. We know how to set up these options for the manipulator, and we also know over here, remember the plus key, slide it down here to transform orientations. We know how to set up transform orientations and so on and so forth. And so we kind of laid the groundwork for what we're going to do next. And that is, okay, so now let's learn out how to manipulate these objects. And you should by now have a pretty good feel for Blender, pretty good feel for the interface, how everything's working, right-clicking, dragging, you know, setting your preferences. If you haven't done that, go back to those earlier videos where I had you set the preferences to for editing to for example, input, set it to emulate 3-button mouse, and on editing was release confirms. Those are my two preferences that are not on by default, by the way. So make sure you have that all set, and if you've missed any of the earlier videos, do that next, okay? And then come back in the next video. We're going to go into just manipulating objects and how that's all going to work, as well as some keyboard shortcuts to help that along, you know, rotating, moving, and so on, as well as start getting into snapping and how that all relates to pivot points and so on. Okay, so that's what we're doing next.